We don't need military junk around this baby. The room went silent. 30 women stood frozen around folding tables covered in pastel decorations and baby gifts. A half-cut sheet cake sat untouched. Someone's phone stopped playing soft country music. My mother-in-law had just thrown my deployment blanket into the trash. Not dropped it. Not set it aside. Thrown it away. I stared at the dark green wool blanket sticking halfway out of the black trash bag. The same blanket that had traveled with me through 2 deployments. The same blanket that had sat beside my bunk in Afghanistan. The same blanket that had belonged to Ryan's family long before I ever entered their lives. Linda Carter folded her arms and gave a dismissive shrug. It's filthy, Emily. A few uncomfortable laughs escaped from people who clearly didn't know what else to do. Then she added the line that made my chest tighten. We don't need military junk around this baby. For a moment I thought Ryan would say something. Anything. But my husband simply stood there near the gift table staring at the floor. That hurt more than Linda's words. Without saying a word, I walked across the room. Every eye followed me. I reached into the trash can, pulled out the blanket, folded it carefully, pressed it against my chest. Then I walked out. No argument. No scene. No tears. Just silence. 6 hours later, my husband called, and for the first time in 12 years of marriage, Ryan sounded terrified. Emily, he said, his voice shaking, please tell me you still have that blanket. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, a retired Army major, and after 7 years of infertility treatments, heartbreak and disappointment, I was finally pregnant. 32 weeks pregnant, to be exact. The baby shower should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it became the day everything changed. Looking back now, maybe I should have seen it coming. Linda and I had never truly gotten along. She wasn't cruel in the obvious way. She wasn't the screaming, dramatic television version of a mother-in-law. She was worse. She smiled while she cut you down. She wrapped criticism inside concern. And for years, she made it clear she didn't approve of my military career. In her mind, women belonged at home. Women raised children. Women didn't spend years in uniform. She had never forgiven me for choosing the Army, even after retirement, even after marriage, even after I became pregnant, especially after I became pregnant, because now she viewed the baby as hers to protect from everything she disliked about me, including my military past. The baby shower took place at a community center outside Fort Liberty in North Carolina. Most of the guests were family friends, church members, and women Linda had known for decades. I knew maybe 6 people in the room. The decorations were beautiful. Blue balloons, white flowers, tiny toy soldiers mixed among baby blocks. That part had actually been my idea. I wanted a nursery that honored family history, not glorified war, just remembered sacrifice. Ryan had liked the idea. At least he had at home. Around his mother, he became a different person. Quieter, smaller, careful. The shower started pleasantly enough. People played games, shared stories, opened gifts. Then someone asked about the blanket. A woman named Carol pointed toward it. Oh, that's beautiful. Did you make it? I smiled. No, it's a family blanket. I ran my hand across the worn fabric. It belonged to Ryan's grandfather, then his father, then Ryan. It traveled through 4 generations. A few women leaned closer. The blanket wasn't fancy. No designer logo. No expensive embroidery. Just old military wool that had survived decades. But to me it was priceless. I explained that I planned to wrap our son in it after he was born. That was when Linda rolled her eyes. I should have known trouble was coming. You aren't seriously putting that thing around a newborn, are you? She asked. The room grew quiet. I laughed awkwardly. Of course I am. She shook her head. It looks ancient. It's family history. It's an old blanket. It means something to us. Linda snorted. It means something to you. Ryan sat nearby sipping iced tea, silent. Again, the conversation moved on. Or at least I thought it had. About 20 minutes later, people began gathering around the gift table. I was opening presents when Linda suddenly picked up the blanket. At first I assumed she was moving it. Instead, she carried it across the room, straight to the trash can. I watched in disbelief. She dropped it inside. Then came the words. We don't need military junk around this baby. The silence afterward felt endless. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to say. Especially Ryan. I remember looking at him. Waiting. Begging. Just once. Stand up for me. Stand up for us. But he didn't. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to stop expecting him to choose me. Enough to stop fighting for approval I would never receive. I picked up the blanket and left. The drive home took 20 minutes. I cried for 18 of them. Not because of the blanket. Because of what it represented. The years. The sacrifices. The people who came before us. And because my husband had watched it happen. Then done nothing. When I arrived home, I carried the blanket upstairs. There was a cedar chest at the foot of our bed. Inside were family photographs, military documents, and keepsakes. I carefully folded the blanket and placed it inside. Then I closed the lid. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed afterward, one hand resting on my stomach, feeling my son kick, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself none of it mattered, trying to believe I wasn't alone. The house felt painfully quiet. Then my phone rang. Ryan. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered, "Hello?" For a second, all I heard was breathing. Then his voice. Panicked. Raw. Unlike anything I'd ever heard before. "Emily, what? Please tell me you still have that blanket." I sat upright. Something in his tone immediately caught my attention. Fear. Real fear. My heart started racing. "Why?" There was a long pause. Then Ryan spoke. And the words that came next would change everything I thought I knew about that blanket. Because Grandpa's military keepsake box was opened after the shower. Another pause. His breathing sounded uneven. "And Emily..." My stomach tightened. "Something's missing." I stared at my phone long after Ryan stopped talking. The blanket sat downstairs inside the cedar chest exactly where I'd left it. For several seconds I couldn't understand why he sounded so frightened. Then I remembered something. Ryan's grandfather wasn't the kind of man who misplaced things. Even after turning 88, Walter Carter had kept every family document organized with military precision. Every photograph, every letter, every medal had a place. If something was missing, there was a reason. "What do you mean something's missing?" I asked. Ryan exhaled heavily. "We opened Grandpa's keepsake box tonight." "Why?" "Because Uncle Frank brought over some old photographs from Vietnam." I could hear voices in the background. His mother, his father, several relatives. Everyone sounded tense. "Grandpa wanted us to add the photos to the collection," Ryan continued. "But when we opened the box, one compartment was empty." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I already knew where this conversation was going. "Ryan." "Yeah, you finally found out." Silence. Another long silence. Then he whispered, "Emily." I closed my eyes. "You found Grandpa's note?" "Yes." Of course they had. The note. The one nobody bothered reading years ago. The one Walter had specifically told me never to lose. The one that explained everything. I slowly stood and walked downstairs. The cedar chest sat beneath the living room window. Moonlight spilled across the floor. For a moment I simply stared at it. Then I opened the lid. The deployment blanket rested exactly where I'd placed it. Safe. Untouched. I ran my fingers across the worn fabric. Memories flooded back. Afghanistan. Dust storms. Long nights. Letters from home. Friends who never came back. And beneath the fabric, hidden where few people knew to look, was something much older than my military service. Something that belonged to the Carter family. Something Walter had trusted me to protect. "I have the blanket," I said quietly. The relief on the other end of the line was immediate. Oh, thank God. But my anger hadn't disappeared. Not even close. "Funny," I said. Ryan fell silent. "Emily, 6 hours ago your mother called it military junk." I heard him swallow. "You're right. 6 hours ago she threw it in the trash." "I know. And 6 hours ago you stood there and watched." That silence hurt more than any argument. Because he couldn't deny it. Finally he spoke. "I should have stopped her." "Yes, I know. But you didn't." "No." I sat down on the couch. For the first time all day, Ryan sounded genuinely ashamed. Not defensive. Not frustrated. Ashamed. And honestly, that made me even sadder. Because it had taken a family crisis for him to understand what happened. "What exactly did Grandpa write?" I asked. Ryan answered immediately. "The note says the family keepsakes were sewn into the blanket years ago." I laughed softly. "Years ago? That's what it says. Ryan, some of those items have been hidden there for over 70 years. He didn't respond, because he hadn't known. Neither had Linda. Neither had most of the family. Only Walter. And eventually me. When Walter's health began failing 3 years earlier, he'd invited me over for coffee. Just the two of us. No big speech. No ceremony. Just an old soldier and a younger one sitting at his kitchen table. That afternoon he opened the blanket and showed me what was hidden inside. I could still remember his hands shaking slightly as he unfolded it. There were carefully stitched pockets between the layers of fabric. Not obvious, not visible unless you knew where to look. Each pocket contained a piece of family history. A handwritten letter, military patches, photographs, official citations, pieces of 4 generations of service. Walter had looked at me and smiled. One day this goes to your child. I had nearly cried. Not because of the items, because of the trust, because I wasn't born a Carter. I married into the family, yet Walter had chosen me, not Ryan, not Linda, me. Maybe because I understood service. Maybe because I respected history. Maybe because he knew I'd protect it. Whatever the reason, I never forgot that conversation. Now Ryan was finally learning what his grandfather had entrusted to me. "What exactly is in there?" he asked quietly. I looked toward the blanket. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes," so I told him. The first item was a letter written in 1944 by his great-grandfather before leaving for Europe during World War II. A real letter, written by hand, addressed to his wife. The paper had yellowed with age, but the words remained. The second item was a Korean War unit patch. The third was a Vietnam-era service ribbon. Then came photographs, letters, military records, stories preserved in paper and cloth. Ryan listened without interrupting. Then I mentioned the final item, the one Walter valued most. The Bronze Star citation. Ryan inhaled sharply. "Grandpa's?" "Yes." The room on his end suddenly became quiet. Apparently everyone was listening now. Even Linda. Good. Let her listen. Let her hear what she nearly threw away. "Grandpa never told us all of this," Ryan said. "No." "Why not?" "Because he believed people value things more when they earn the story behind them." Another long pause followed. Then Ryan said something unexpected. "I don't think I ever earned it." I leaned back against the couch. For the first time that evening, I felt my anger soften slightly. Just slightly. Because he wasn't making excuses. He was telling the truth. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, Ryan asked the question I knew was coming. "Can I come see you?" I looked toward the blanket again. Toward the cedar chest. Toward everything that had happened that day. "I don't know. Emily, you let her humiliate me." "I know. You let her humiliate our son's future." "I know." His voice cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough to sound human. "I know." And for the first time since leaving the baby shower, I believed he actually did. Then another voice suddenly appeared in the background. Weak, elderly, but unmistakable. "Walter, Ryan's grandfather." "Put me on speaker." Ryan obeyed immediately. A second later, Walter's voice filled the line. "Emily." "Yes, Walter." "Do you still have the blanket?" I smiled despite everything. "Of course I do." The old man exhaled. The sound carried years of relief. "Good." Then his voice became serious. "Because there is one thing Ryan hasn't told you yet." I sat upright. "What?" Walter paused, long enough for everyone listening to become nervous. Then he said quietly, "That blanket isn't just holding family memories." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Another pause. Then the old veteran spoke words that changed the entire situation. "There's something else sewn inside that nobody has discovered yet." I didn't sleep that night. After Walter's final words, the entire family seemed to hold its breath. Even over the phone I could feel it. Ryan wasn't speaking. Linda wasn't speaking. Nobody was speaking. Only Walter, the 90-year-old veteran who had somehow managed to turn an ugly baby shower into a family mystery. I tightened my grip on the phone. "What do you mean nobody discovered it yet?" Walter chuckled softly. The sound reminded me of every old soldier I'd ever met. Patient, steady, never in a hurry. Exactly what I said. "There's another pocket." "Yes." Ryan immediately spoke up. "Grandpa, are you serious?" "I've been serious for 90 years. For the first time all evening I laughed. So did Walter. Then his tone changed. Emily opened the blanket. I glanced toward the cedar chest. "You want me to do it now?" Yes. The entire family was listening. I could hear chairs moving. People gathering closer around the speakerphone. Even Linda. Especially Linda. I carried the blanket onto the dining room table. My hands trembled slightly as I spread it open. I've known about the hidden pockets for years. I thought I knew every inch of the fabric. Apparently I was wrong. "Look near the bottom corner," Walter instructed. I followed his directions. Nothing. Then I noticed something. A row of stitches. Older than the others. Fainter. Almost invisible. My heartbeat accelerated. "Wait, what is it?" Ryan asked. "I think I found it." The room on both ends of the call became silent. I carefully slid a small seam ripper beneath the stitches. The thread loosened. A hidden flap opened, and inside sat a thin leather envelope. I froze. "What is it?" Ryan asked. "I don't know." Walter laughed again. "Now you do." The envelope looked ancient. The leather had darkened with age. The edges were worn smooth from decades of protection. Slowly I removed it. Inside were several folded documents. The first paper immediately caught my attention. It was dated 1945. The second was dated 1953. The third carried military markings from 1969. I unfolded them one by one. My eyes widened. "Emily," Ryan said. "What is it?" I sat down heavily. For a moment I couldn't answer, because suddenly I understood why Walter had hidden them, and why he'd never told anyone, including me. "What is it?" Ryan repeated. "It's a family history." "What?" "A complete one." The documents weren't medals. They weren't awards. They were stories. Personal stories. Letters written by each generation of Carter men during wartime. Letters never mailed. Letters never shared. Letters intended for future descendants. I swallowed hard. Oh my God. The first letter came from Ryan's great-grandfather during World War II. He wrote about fear, not heroism. Fear. Fear of leaving his wife behind. Fear of never seeing home again. Fear of dying before meeting the child she was carrying. The honesty nearly broke my heart. The second letter came from his grandfather during Korea. The third came from Walter during Vietnam. Each man wrote about duty, sacrifice, family, and love. Not one letter glorified war. Not one. They were simply fathers and sons trying to leave wisdom behind. The room on the other end of the phone was completely silent. Then Walter spoke. "Read the last page." I turned to the final document. It had been written only 3 years earlier, by Walter himself. My eyes moved across the page. Halfway through, tears filled them. "Emily," Ryan asked. I couldn't answer immediately. The words were too powerful. Finally, I read them aloud. "If you're hearing this, it means the blanket has reached another generation." My voice cracked. I continued. "Remember this, the value of our family's service is not found in medals, uniforms, or photographs." Everyone listened. "The value is found in how we treat each other when nobody is watching." Silence. I continued reading. "If future generations inherit our keepsakes but forget our character, then we have failed them." The room stayed quiet. No one moved. No one interrupted. Then I reached the final paragraph. And everything changed. If there is one lesson I hope survives longer than any military record, it is this: respect what you do not yet understand. I stopped reading, because I couldn't continue. Not immediately. The words hit too close to home. Especially after what happened at the baby shower. Several seconds passed. Then someone began crying. Linda. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The kind of crying people do when they suddenly recognize their own mistakes. Nobody comforted her. Nobody attacked her. The letter spoke for itself. Eventually, Walter broke the silence. "I hid those letters because I didn't want the family remembering the medals." His voice remained steady. "I wanted them remembering the people." I looked down at the blanket. The old wool seemed different now. Not because it contained hidden treasures. Because it contained lives. Entire lives. Stories that would have disappeared forever if someone hadn't protected them. Suddenly I understood why Walter trusted me with it. The blanket wasn't about military service. It was about memory, family, identity, everything that survives after people are gone. Then Ryan spoke, and for the first time all evening his words surprised me. "I'm coming over." I frowned. "Ryan." "No." His voice was firm, stronger than before. "I'm coming over because I owe you an apology." The room behind him remained silent. "I should have stood up for you." I didn't answer. "You shouldn't have had to protect that blanket alone." Still, I said nothing, because part of me wanted to hear him say it, wanted him to finally understand. And he did. "I failed you today." My eyes filled with tears, not because he was apologizing, because he finally stopped defending himself. For the first time. Ever. Then another voice interrupted. "Linda." Quiet. Small. Almost unrecognizable. "Emily." I closed my eyes. "Yes." The next words shocked everyone, including Ryan, including Walter, including me. "I'm sorry." Silence followed. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just silence. Because some wounds don't heal in a single conversation. But for the first time the door had opened. And neither of us knew what would happen next. What none of us realized was that by morning, the story would spread beyond our family, beyond the baby shower, beyond our town. And a group of veterans would soon learn exactly what had happened to the blanket. When they did, everything would change. The next morning, I woke up expecting regret, not from Linda, not from Ryan, from myself. I thought maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed at the shower. Maybe I should have laughed it off. Maybe I should have been the bigger person. Then I looked at the deployment blanket folded across the back of my couch, and I remembered exactly what happened. I hadn't overreacted. Someone had thrown 4 generations of family history into a trash can. The fact that she didn't know what was inside wasn't the point. The point was that she never cared enough to ask. Around 9 o'clock, my phone started ringing. At first, I ignored it. Then it rang again, and again. By noon, I had received 8 calls. Not from family, from veterans. Word had spread. Small military communities have a way of doing that, especially around Fort Liberty. Someone told someone, then someone else. And before long, people were discussing the baby shower disaster over breakfast at the VFW. The story wasn't being told as gossip. It was being told as a warning, a reminder, a conversation about family heritage, about respect, about things people throw away because they don't understand them. By early afternoon, I received a call from a man named Charlie Reynolds, retired Army Sergeant Major, Vietnam veteran, friend of Walter's for nearly 50 years. Emily, yes. I heard about the blanket. I sighed. So everybody knows? Pretty much. I laughed despite myself. Sounds about right. There was a pause. Then Charlie said something unexpected. We'd like you to come speak at the Heritage Night event next week. I blinked. What? The Veterans Heritage Association. I knew the organization. Every year they hosted a gathering where local families shared military history, photographs, stories, and memorabilia. Usually attendance was modest. Mostly older veterans and their families. This isn't really my thing, I said. It should be. I don't want attention. Then don't make it about attention. I waited. Charlie continued. Make it about the story. That stayed with me, because he was right. The blanket had never been about me. Not really. It was about everyone who came before me. By the time I hung up, I wasn't sure what I would do. 3 days later, I had my answer. I accepted the invitation. The week that followed felt strange. Ryan came home. Not with excuses, not with explanations, with effort. Real effort. For the first time in years, he stopped trying to keep everyone happy. Instead, he started trying to do what was right. One evening, he sat beside me on the porch. The summer air felt warm against our skin. We watched fireflies drift across the yard. I talked to Mom. I nodded. How'd that go? He laughed. About as well as you'd expect. That told me everything. For decades, Linda had been the center of gravity in the Carter family. Everyone adjusted around her. Everyone avoided conflict, including Ryan, especially Ryan. But something had shifted, not because of the blanket. Because of Walter's letter. Respect what you do not yet understand. Those words haunted all of us, including Linda. She cried, Ryan admitted. I looked at him. Really? That surprised me. Linda wasn't a woman who cried easily. In fact, I wasn't sure I'd ever seen it happen. She said she kept hearing Grandpa's words. Neither of us spoke for a while. Eventually, Ryan squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. I smiled sadly. I know. For once, I meant it. The Heritage Night event took place the following Friday. The community hall was packed. Far more people than usual. Veterans, military spouses, children, grandchildren, people carrying framed photographs, old uniforms, shadow boxes filled with medals, stories. Everywhere I looked, there were stories. I arrived carrying the deployment blanket. The room immediately seemed to notice. Not because it was beautiful, because everyone now knew what it represented. Charlie greeted me at the entrance. So that's the famous blanket. I laughed. I wish it wasn't famous. Too late. The event began shortly after 7. One by one, families stepped onto the stage. A Marine talked about his father. A Navy veteran displayed letters from World War II. An Air Force widow shared photographs she'd protected for 40 years. The room laughed. The room cried. The room remembered. Then Charlie called my name. I froze. Suddenly, every eye was on me. I stood slowly, one hand resting on my pregnant stomach, the other holding the blanket, and walked to the stage. The room became silent. I hadn't prepared a speech. I simply told the truth. I told them about Walter, about the letters, about the hidden pockets, about 4 generations of military service. Then I told them about the baby shower. You could have heard a pin drop. Nobody interrupted. Nobody reacted dramatically. They just listened. When I finished, I unfolded the blanket. Carefully, reverently, one by one I displayed the items hidden inside. The World War II letter, the Korean War patch, the Vietnam ribbon, the Bronze Star citation, and finally Walter's letter. Several veterans wiped away tears. Others nodded quietly, not because of the military decorations, because they understood what was really being preserved. Family, memory, identity. Then something happened that nobody expected. Charlie dimmed the lights. A projector screen illuminated behind me. An old video appeared. The room froze. I recognized the face immediately. Walter, recorded 2 years earlier. Apparently, Charlie had known about it all along. Walter smiled from the screen. Older, frailer, but unmistakably himself. The room fell silent. Then he began speaking. Families spend too much time arguing about objects. Soft laughter filled the room. Walter smiled. But objects aren't what matter. He held up an old photograph. They matter because of the people connected to them. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then came the line that seemed to hit everyone at once. If future generations forget where they came from, they'll never understand who they are. Silence. Absolute silence. And in the third row, Linda Carter began to cry. Not quietly this time. Openly. Honestly, for the first time since I'd known her. The room didn't judge her. The room didn't mock her. They simply watched. Because everyone understood what she had finally realized. She hadn't thrown away military junk. She had nearly thrown away a family's soul. When the event ended, people approached me for nearly an hour. Then eventually the crowd thinned. The hall grew quiet, and I saw Linda standing alone near the exit, waiting, nervous, holding her purse with both hands. When our eyes met, she took a deep breath, then slowly walked toward me. Emily, she said softly. I nodded. She looked at the blanket, then back at me, and with tears still shining in her eyes, she asked the question neither of us could avoid anymore. Can we talk? For a moment I simply looked at her, the same woman who had thrown the blanket into a trash can, the same woman who had spent years criticizing my military career, the same woman who had made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage more times than I could count. A week earlier I probably would have walked away. But something felt different now. Maybe it was Walter's letter. Maybe it was the baby kicking gently inside me. Maybe I was simply tired of carrying anger. Either way, I nodded. Okay. Linda exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath for days. We found 2 empty chairs near the back of the hall. The crowd had mostly gone home. Volunteers were folding tables. Someone was stacking chairs. The evening was ending. And finally, so was the fight. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Linda surprised me. I was wrong. No excuses, no qualifications, no but. Just wrong. I waited. She looked down at her hands. When Ryan was little, I used to think military families were strong. I frowned. That wasn't what I expected. She continued quietly. My older brother joined the army in 1970. The room seemed to disappear. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't hearing from my mother-in-law. I was hearing from a grieving sister. He never came home. My chest tightened. Linda swallowed hard. He wasn't killed in combat. She managed a sad smile. He survived Vietnam. I listened carefully. But the man who came home wasn't the same man who left. Her eyes filled with tears. Back then, people didn't talk about trauma. I nodded. They certainly didn't. He struggled for years. The pain in her voice felt decades old. He lost his marriage. She paused. He lost himself. I finally understood. Not everything, but enough. Linda hadn't hated the military. She hated what she believed it had taken from her family. And somewhere along the way, she had started blaming the uniform instead of the war. Then she met me, a woman in uniform. A constant reminder. A target. I never realized I was taking it out on you, she whispered. I believed her, not because it excused anything, because it explained it. Those are 2 very different things. We sat quietly for several moments. Then she wiped her eyes. When I threw that blanket away, I wasn't thinking about your family. She laughed bitterly. I wasn't even thinking about mine. I looked at the deployment blanket folded across my lap. The blanket had survived 4 generations. Wars. Deployments. Moves. Deaths. And somehow it had survived us too. I should have asked what it meant before judging it, Linda said. Yes. I should have respected you. Yes. She nodded. I know. For once that was enough. Not perfect. Not magical. Just honest. And honest was a good place to start. A few days later, Walter invited the family to his house. Every single one of us came. Ryan. His parents. His father. His uncles. His cousins. Even relatives who rarely attended family gatherings. Walter sat in his favorite chair near the fireplace. The deployment blanket rested across his knees. Everyone noticed it. Nobody joked about it. Nobody dismissed it. Nobody called it junk. That chapter was over. Walter looked around the room. His eyes lingered on each family member. Then he smiled. You know what the funny part is? Nobody answered. The blanket was never the important thing. Several people laughed softly, including me, because we knew exactly what he meant. The important thing was getting all of you in the same room. More laughter. Then Walter became serious. You inherited stories. The room grew quiet. You inherited sacrifices. He placed one hand on the blanket. You inherited responsibility. Nobody looked away. Because every person in that room understood the message. The future doesn't protect itself. Families don't preserve themselves automatically. Somebody has to care. Somebody has to remember. Somebody has to pass the stories forward. Walter looked directly at me, then at Ryan, then at my stomach. The next generation is already listening. I felt tears form immediately. So did Ryan. 3 months later, our son was born. A healthy little boy with his father's eyes and a surprisingly loud cry. The hospital room overflowed with visitors. Flowers, balloons, cards, family. And standing near the window was Linda, holding the deployment blanket. Carefully, respectfully, almost reverently, she walked over to my bed. Without saying a word, she handed it to me. I unfolded it slowly. Inside remained every letter, every patch, every keepsake, every story. Protected, preserved, waiting. Ryan sat beside me as I wrapped our son in the blanket for the first time. The room fell silent, not because of military history, not because of medals, not because of tradition, because everyone understood what they were witnessing. A family choosing to move forward. Together. Walter stood beside the bed. His eyes glistened. He gently touched the blanket. Then he touched his great-grandson's tiny hand and smiled. The same smile I'd seen the day he first showed me the hidden pockets. The smile of a man who knew the story would continue. Today, when people ask about the blanket, I tell them the truth. The most valuable thing sewn inside wasn't a medal. It wasn't a military citation. It wasn't a historic document. It was a lesson. Never dismiss something simply because you don't understand it. Every family carries stories worth protecting. Every generation leaves behind lessons, sacrifices, and memories. And sometimes the things that look ordinary on the outside are carrying treasures you can't see. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to think about the stories in your own family. Ask questions. Listen to your parents and grandparents. Preserve the memories that might otherwise be lost. And if this journey reminded you of someone you love, consider sharing it with them. Thank you for spending this time with me. The end.